Hi everybody, I'm Ingrid and this is my husband Robert Green. We're in Tonnebuck, Gippsland, Victoria. So halfway between Pakenham and Warragul on the eastern side of Melbourne. In what has up until 2 years ago, 18 months ago, probably been the most idyllic little spot in the world. So March the 1st, 2019, we had dry lightning strikes up in the bush, actually directly behind us in the hills there. And it started 3 fires and they went straight up. We'd had a very wet spring the year before, so there was a lot of grass and undercover up in the bush. That hadn't been burnt for 80 years. It was in really tough, rough country and the fires got out of control. So we got all the horses out, all the cattle were basically opened up to have free rein, so that we just opened every internal gate, let them go as much as we could. Got as much water as possible going around the house and the garden to sort of have that wet, and then the fire fronts effectively came through Sunday morning, hit our first block, a lease block where we had heifers about on point of calving, and then it came through here Sunday afternoon and hit this property and another property pretty much at the same time.
Prior to the fire front coming, we made a decision to go to an area where we knew we could get into an open paddock if need be, and then we were joined by some CFA crews as well, so we were there while the fire front went through. Initially, after the fire front, then you had that period of time where you're reassessing what you do. And then once we felt it was safe, and you started going around checking assets. The fences were disappearing before our eyes because initially after the fire front you'd look around and you still had standing posts and wire and you think, oh, this is good, we've been spared, and then you come back an hour later and there's several posts missing, you come back 2 hours later and there's barbed wire on the ground. So it was about containing your cattle, sorting those out, and so they weren't just wandering on the road. And so that was a priority, and that took a few days to get that sorted with finding agistment and moving and trucking them out. And then you started thinking about the rebuilding. What are your priorities? There was one bit of advice that we were given from Jim Armstrong, and that was don't rush it. It's going to take 12 to 15 months to rebuild. Have a think about it and look at there may be things that were there that got destroyed you want to replace and do it differently. So just take your time, and that was probably some of the best advice, or key part of the advice that it made you, because you are in the heat of the moment when your adrenaline's still there, you want to do everything quickly and you want to get back, you want to repair 20 years of work in 3 months, and you think you can. There's a period of time you think you can do it.
Yeah, look, I'm Jim Armstrong. We own 150 acres here. We came down here in 2004. We lived in Canberra all our lives, and we needed a change from after milking cows, and came down here, and in 2009 we got burnt out. We had embers to start with, which was probably a little bit of a shock, but anyway, they came, and then the fire came to us from a couple of different directions, and we controlled that. And then in the evening there was a message on our CFA that there was going to be a wind change at 6 o'clock, and it came back, it saved ruin, and it came back and took all our sheds out. There was just nothing we could do about that. It just blew and blew and the sheds got burnt. But we saved everything else, and from then on it was a slow rebuilding. My comment to other people would be, get your boundary fence up, and then, because you might have thought that sometimes you'd like to shift things and you can't afford to do it because it's going to cost money and all this. And we're saying now is your opportunity to do that. If you want to shift a shed, it got burnt down because it was always in the wrong place. It's like we had here, we had a hay shed, really it was in the wrong place. And we relocated that further down the hill and where it's much better. So yeah, get your boundary fence up and take a good deep breath and have a lot of discussion about where your farm would like to be, because if you don't get burnt out again, you'll never get that opportunity to redesign your farm, laneways, fences, whatever it is. Just take your time and do it slowly.
We're standing in one of the paddocks on the home front at the moment. This is the direction that the fire actually came from. On the home property, 100% of the soil got burnt, 100% of the property got burnt. Had 3 lease blocks, 100% of those got burnt, and then one other block where 75% got burnt, and we had cattle on all those properties. The first thing was to find them. Most of them were actually within their boundaries. We had a few cattle from other people's properties on them, so that was a bit of a sorting process. But the other thing is yards got burnt, and most of our neighbours lost their yards. We have a lot of metal yards, so we were able to use those to get animals, truck them down to the river block where we still had yards and hold them there. Neighbours could then borrow those yards and our portable ramp and try and sort their stock as well. Our decision was, do we hold them or sell? All our neighbours said we're selling. My immediate reaction was, I can't do that. They were going for $200 a head. Some of them were 4th and 5th generation, some of them I'd hand raised, all of that sort of stuff. So we made the decision to hold. We sold 30. They went straight to the abattoir, so they didn't get flogged through the sale yards. And then that actually gave us a bit of cash to buy food to feed what we were retaining. We had one lease property where we had 30 heifers on point of calving that we just didn't want to put them through the pressure of putting them on the truck and sending them out. So we held them in one paddock there, bought feed in, molasses, got molasses in with minerals for them, and then just fed them hay. They all calved except for one. The first one lost the calf. And of course, luckily, we had twins and I got to have a potty in the middle of all of this. We retained 70 cows and calves at the river and 50 weaners out. They went out. And then probably 100 cows were distributed around various parts of Victoria. And then we held the animals that were injured and needed vet treatment. We had vet treatment for 15 young fellas for 21 days. Vet came every 3 days to check them. We put one of those down and the rest all survived, and they were actually sold in August, September, but they were a massive help to pay bills. And there was that whole payoff of buying feed in with the price, but we actually made pretty good money on them, which was a big help in paying bills. So this area here this is the first property we actually bought here in Tonnebuck, and we had a few sheds here. The one behind us went up on the night of the 3rd. We actually had a cool van in there packed with 800 kilos of meat that was going up in smoke, so it actually smelled like one massive barbecue happening. You could smell it for miles away. Now we've replaced it with a slightly bigger shed, gone for 2 more bays. In retrospect, we've made a few changes. So one is we've cut this bank around here. It's not quite as big as what we like. We make it a little bit bigger just so we can get a tractor around there. It'll also be gravelled, so this will be a completely clear space, so we know there's no debris and leaf litter and grass and dead grass, which happens in the dry years. The other thing is we had a second shed here that didn't burn, which we fully expected to go, but the difference was it had a cement floor. And I think if you've got the cement up to the edge, the embers can't get in underneath and start the fire, because the shed survived the fire front, but it didn't survive the ember attack. Well, after the fires, quite frankly, we really didn't know what to do. We had 2 priorities. I had 2 priorities, cattle and then the pastures. Didn't really know what to do with it. So we ended up putting chook manure all over everything in April and May. It was a bit spread out because of supplies and all of that sort of stuff. So some of it probably went on a bit late, which mucked up paddocks when they were spreading it. We decided we'd do a bit of an experiment, try some multi-species pasture and then just leave the others as they were to see what had come through. We probably grew the best crop of capeweed in the district to start after the chook manure came through and we had the first sort of 3 lots of rain. We had beautiful capeweed everywhere. On the advice of AgVic, we sprayed it, and it was sprayed more heavily than what we'd asked, so we lost the clover, which I was really upset about. But we actually ended up having no capeweed, and it was really clear when we were driving from one block to the other. You could look up at this farm, see a golden paddock beside it, which is the neighbours, and then our paddocks were green, and the difference in the feed value was actually enormous of what we could get. So we sort of did about 20 acres on each property, multi-species, and we've done that a few times. This is the third one in this paddock, and paddock next door was just left as is, so we've got a difference there with it. But what I see overall on our place is that our weeds this year are actually really low, and the only thing is I think we've tried very hard to always keep green cover on everything. Rotationally grazing, moving the cattle every 24 hours, some strip grazing, moving them, getting them on and off and on and off. So the grass is coming back quicker, they're not overgrazing, not bare ground grazing, and I think that's made a massive difference with the recovery. One thing we learnt was nothing does burn. We thought we had absolutely bare paddocks because we'd been dry for so long. We didn't think they could burn, but it does burn. Manure burns for days after the fire. And what did surprise us, on the river block we had what was the very, very worst paddock we'd planted turnips into. And we'd had 1 feed of turnips, it hadn't come back because we hadn't got rain, and we were just holding the paddock hoping we'd have 20 mil of rain, we'd get a nice crop. That fire front went through and got pulled up by the turnips. So that probably saved on that other block, losing 3 sheds and the yards and things like that. So it was really interesting having that bit of, well, it wasn't even green cover, but there was obviously enough life and moisture left in the turnips and their stalks that it could stop that grass fire going through. So we're down at the river block where you all came and helped us clean up 3 times. Thank you very much. This is right at the very southern end where there were those tree lines that got hit heavily. Right behind me is the 2 Mile Creek, and then to the east is the Bunyip River that got taken out quite badly with all of the fences, tree lines and everything else. These paddocks were cut for hay for probably 40 years, I suppose, before we bought it a year before the fire. It's interesting the way they've come back. There's a huge acid root on these blocks, and the parts that got burnt the worst, where the trees were for about 50 metres out into the paddock, you probably all remember how the roots were all exposed. Well, that's actually where the best pasture is now, and the cattle are just coming out of this today, but we had grass up to 60 centimetres high there, whereas in the acid root area, 5, 10, not even worth thinking about feeding off, and they haven't been in here since February, March. The tree lines, quite a few people thought we should have just obliterated every one of those dead trees that were there. It's really interesting the regrowth we've got underneath. Some of it's fantastic, some's not. There's a couple of areas where we've still got bare black dirt, and it has that terrible smell about it, but other areas are really promising and looking good. We've got some of the cows and calves behind us. Been moving them every 24 hours, and except they had a breakout for today. This property is way behind the home block, is in terms of regeneration, the way the grass is coming back, the uneven growth. There's a lot of sorrel, it's waterlogged, and I think the root mat is a big issue which we've still got to address and get around. So this is one of the tree lines that you guys all cleaned up, thank you very much. So this fencing, these are Gallagher posts, they're plastic covered fiberglass, and apparently they did survive in fire quite well, but we were absolutely sick of trying to clean up branches over trees, knew that we'd have a lot more in the next 10 years with half burnt ones coming down. So the feature of these is that a tree can fall, land, it'll come right over like that, and you just take the branch off and stand up fence and off you go.
I even got caught out, I had a coil of wire rolled up, left on the ground, and when I cut it for hay, the mower went through it. And I know it happened right through the area. I've talked to contractors and said, yes, we picked up a lot of wire in that first year, because people would roll up wire for you and they say, oh, well, the owner can pick it up. You just didn't get back.
If you remember the last time we came for the field day, we walked amongst here and there was no regeneration coming up, and I think that might have been September. Then we had that little bit of rain November, and suddenly these babies started popping up everywhere. So I was pretty excited to see all these little tackers with their heads up everywhere. And it's interesting to see what's come back. We've got quite a bit of tea tree, and then we've got these gums, but they've also come up in clusters. So we've got some bits where there'll be 100 metres and there's nothing, and then we've got these really dense little patches, and they look very healthy to me. And hopefully they'll be here for another generation. So we been asked a few times as to why we kept going after the fires, what kept us going. My biggest concern was, you know, your family's safe. Your next thing is your responsibility to your livestock. We've raised these, we have a duty of care to looking after them. And when you've left them in a fire zone and, you know, the fire's gone over the top of them, it's our duty to look after them. My first focus really since the fires was look after the cattle, get them out, get them off the property, feed what we can, do the medical assistance of what we can do, and then the second part was feed these animals, so try and do the pasture. And then we're doing the next steps ongoing from there, which is things like the shelter belts for them, so we've got wind and sun protection, biodiversity, and all of those sorts of things. But for me, after you know your family's safe, the next thing is it's your animals. That's what keeps me going. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have the animals. I'd probably just wouldn't care.
Yeah, it cannot be underestimated. That is without shadow of a doubt the fact that the various groups that we're involved in volunteered their time. We had multiple workers helping clean up tree lines. Now you go and try and clear a tree that's fallen over, it'd take you a day to do it yourself, whereas we had several groups of 2-3 people doing that. We had people helping us with the fencing. I forgot to mention we had some other people volunteered their machinery time to come in and pick up the big trees and move it. So that shows people care, and that's what you need in times like this.
Well, we got so much help here, and I went down to Tonnabuck one day to see the boys how they were going, and they just didn't have much gear, no tractors to work with or anything, and so I decided we took the tractor down and worked with quite a few properties in over a 10-month period and put wire away in the bins for them and so forth. And I know they appreciated very much what we've done, but it was just one way of supporting because of what we had been done and helped. I think had not been burnt out, I didn't even know where Tonnabuck was, really. I think it's the fact that we had help, it was time to give help back to other people.
Thank you everybody for coming and watching, and thank you very, very much for all your support over the last 15 months. It's been absolutely enormous. I don't think we would have even got to the first milestone without big lots of not only physical but emotional help that you gave us. And we're very happy to have lots of advice. We need all the help we can get, so if anybody's got some good ideas of how we could regenerate our pastures and the property better, I'd love to hear them, and come and have a look and have an on-site farm walk with us. Thank you.